Hello and welcome to episode 43 of the Sean McGuinness podcast. I hope everyone is having a good day or night or whenever you listen to this podcast, whether it's on your walk, which a lot of people tell me they do. They listen to it when they're doing the steps or getting their walk in, which is brilliant. Kill two birds with one stone, and obviously, like we talked about before, ironically, I'm putting into practice some of the stuff we've talked about regards temptation bundling. So hopefully you like this podcast, and then you combine that with something that you may find hard to do. For example, exercise or getting your steps in. That takes your mind off of you positively reinforce the steps. And yes, that makes me happy if that is the case. If not, it makes me happy that you're listening anyway. Now, what we're going to talk about today is a very, very, very significant topic in the realm of weight loss, and it's one which a lot of people tell me if they just had this one thing in check, their results would skyrocket. And the reason they're not getting results, in contrast to that, is because they lack this trait, and that is self-control. We're going to delve in. Is it all it really is talked about or lives up to be? Is it important with weight loss? What else do we need to consider if it's not important? How to frame it. And all in all, this in itself will teach you how to get better results with your fat loss. Because I might sound like a broken record or an echo or a parrot, but if you're trying to lose fat, you're trying to change your behaviors, okay? And yes, you may have the intention of losing fat, and you may have all that effort to apply, but if you apply it the wrong way, you're not going to get any results. Because it's always like going into the office Monday morning, I'm going to become a millionaire, I'm absolutely committed. You have zero idea about business. How are you going to become a millionaire? Your effort, your intention's there, but if it's not combined with an approach, and that approach should also be combined with an understanding of the process. So hopefully you understand by now the theory of fat loss comes down to calorie deficit. But if you don't understand the theory and application of behavior change, how to change your behaviors in an optimal way, backed by science, there's a gap there, and that gap is down to your understanding and it's down to your application. So you need to combine your intention, motivation with the understanding and the learning component of behavior change, and with the application of behavior change, and that in itself will get you closer to your goals. Okay. Self-control, what is it? First of all, as defined by Google, it is the ability to control oneself, in particular one's emotions and desires, especially in difficult situations. Now, this in itself, this definition, what does it give off in terms of fat loss? I'm gonna imagine you're listening to that definition and you're just thinking of all the times you couldn't say no to that chocolate bar, couldn't say no to that drink, and all the times you've slipped up. And if only you had a little bit more self-control to be able to say no or no thank you, you would be in your dream body by now. Okay? That is not so much the case, especially when it comes to fat loss. People envision themselves, as I said, facing situations of junk food, high calorie food, alcohol, and have a superpower ability to say no and reach their goals. However, let me put it to you this way. And this is going to start the first bit of how we're going to look at self-control. Imagine someone is trying not to commit adultery or cheat. If you're not that posh, you don't understand adultery. Okay, and you give that person all the self-control in the world. Except that person, all they do, if you gave them more self-control, you might say, okay, that's it. They're not going to cheat. They're not going to commit adultery. What if that person just hangs out all the time when they finish work in strip clubs and brothels? And I'm telling you this example, because it's the one which my clients always remember the most. And brothels are legal over here. I'm not talking from experience, I'm just talking because that's the law. In case you're wondering, I'm in Australia. Loads of people booking flights to Australia. But that person trying not to cheat on the partner, whether it's a guy or a girl, I'm not being sexist here, just hangs out in brothels and strip clubs. You could give that person all the self-control in the world, but all they're doing in that situation is simply setting themselves up to fail. So the first thing what we want to look at in regards to self-control and people's definition of self-control and the way they see it should apply to weight loss, they never look at the temptations in their environment. They're only wishing for more self-control. Well, at some point, if you just throw all the temptations in the world at someone, the likelihood of them slipping up or failing at some point is pretty relatively high. Don't you agree? So when we're looking at self-control and you're looking at junk food or high calorie food or alcohol, what you first need to look at is your environment. Is your environment set up, is setting you up for failure? Is it setting you up for failure? Do you have lots of junk food around? Are your cupboards full of high calorie food, junk? And now, let me prerequisite this in saying that obviously junk food doesn't in itself cause you to gain weight or stop you from losing weight. But the way these foods are made, they're made in a way to kind of hijack the reward centers of our brain, like we've talked before. And so the likelihood of you overeating on them is relatively high. And if they're everywhere you go, and you're constantly eating them and they're releasing dopamine and they override your appetite so you can eat more of them, the likelihood of you staying within a calorie deficit is relatively low. Unless there's someone out there that can have an environment full of junk food and not eat it, tip my hat off to you. But that's not me, and that's not a lot of the clients, the majority of the clients I deal with. So are your cupboards filled with junk food? Is it on the counter everywhere you look? Is the wine out everywhere you look? We've talked in podcasts before about your environment. We can relate back to that. They've seen whatever is more arm's length, whether it is junk food or fruit, whatever it is, you're more likely to eat that. Whatever's in arm's length, whatever's an eye level view of your kitchen. If there's wine around, you're more likely to drink it. In contrast, if there's water around, the healthier snacks or lower calorie snacks, you're more likely to eat that as well. More so even junk food, like we talked about before, what's known as the cost of food, what Dr. Stefan Gainey talks about, the kind of cost benefit of expenditure to what you're going to get in. So if you don't have to move that much and you don't have to expend that many calories, and in turn you're going to get a lot of calories in, that's kind of a big win by your brain standard. So it's going to increase the motivation to go and get it. In layman's terms, who can just have Ben and Jerry's line in the freezer and just be happy that it's there, and you're in a deficit, so you're already hungry, your brain's already screaming for high calorie food because you're starving it, and then you have this high calorie food in your house. Okay, that's going to get eaten. It gets eaten in my house. It gets eaten in all of my clients' all my clients' houses. So you have to look at your environment, especially the ones which we can control. You can control your house. But Sean, I have partners and I have kids and they need this food. Guess what you do? You go buy a lockbox. Over here we have Bunnings. A lockbox. You get a nice lock. And you tell your partner, you tell the kids to put their food in that box so you can't get at it. Again, the same way I've talked about before. If you're trying to get off your phone and you're trying to break the habit, first see if you can remove the trigger. Okay? If your phone's a trigger for you to procrastinate, well then get rid of the phone. Put your phone in a lockbox. Get your phone out of there so you don't have to elicit self-control to be able to knock on your phone where you could just not have it in the room. So that's what you do in that case. And that's what we do if one of us, myself or Louise, in a deficit, that's where the food goes. Okay, obviously depend we'll change the codes or have our own one for each person, blah blah blah. But you get the point. And what you have to think about, you might go, Sean, that's absolute bananas, I can never do that. We've never been in a time as humans where junk food firstly has existed. The most high calorie food, if we're in caveman times, would be like honey or nuts. Not those kind of nuts, the ones you can eat, the high calorie ones. So that would be the, and evolutionary people risking their lives to get pots of honey. Well, now we have junk food everywhere, which again we've talked about, hijacked the reward center of our brains. So we've never been in a time where junk food's been so abundant in our environment. We've evolved in a scarce food environment. So now in this day and age, eating this type of food is convenient. You need to find a way of making it inconvenient. So like we've talked about before, a basic sense of one of the things when it comes to changing behaviors, the behaviors you're trying to do, how can you make them easier to do? And then the ones you're trying to stop doing, how can you make them harder to do? So you're trying to create friction between the bad habits, so make it hard to do, and then lessen the friction for the good habits. And that's that. Okay, I've never, like I've talked about before, and I tell my clients, no one's ever taught me about money. So once I start getting money, I would easily blow it. And I wasn't that good at saving it, as crazy as that is. Now, just like calorie deficit, some people may be good and mightn't have an emotional tie to food, and they may just be naturally good at just dieting. There's a few people like that out there. Same with saving. Some people naturally may be good savers, whereas I'm not. So I need to find more, we can say, more drastic ways of doing that. So, and it's funny enough, the book on money I bought, what's it called? The Barefoot Investor. A lot of the stuff he talks about is exactly what I'll tell my clients as well. He says, make sure you can automate it as much as possible to take the conscious thought over. I tell my clients the same way when it comes to food. I'm going to talk about this. Automate your food and your habits in a way where you don't have to think about doing it. So it goes beyond conscious thought. It takes the thought out of it, takes the choice out of it. And then when it comes to savings, can you put the money away in a way where you can't get at it or find it very hard to take it back out? Because that's obviously where people, you be on a night out having a few drinks, you've gone all the way good up to that point, and whether it's saving or whether it's calories, okay, transfer that back across. I'm buying the next round. Well, what happens if you constructed your environment the way where you couldn't get that money? Okay, now you're onto a better strategy, like we've talked about. So have a think about your environment. Is it set up so you don't have to elicit a lot of self-control? People who are the best at losing weight, they actually use self-control the least, because around 50% of a normal day, firstly, is done habitually. So it's done in a way where you don't think about it. Now imagine if 50% of that day you've done automatically, but all those behaviors are congruent with weight loss. Well, firstly, you don't have to elicit any self-control, or you don't have to use any motivation or or willpower. You kind of need discipline to make sure you do up to that point. But all of the aspects or traits which someone puts on a pedestal in regards weight loss, well, if your half of your day is done habitually, you don't have to think about it. So half your day is done without self-control. Whereas there's you going around trying to stress yourself out and trying to say no to everything under the sun, when a person who's successful weight loss just does it automatically half the day, maybe more. I would prefer a lot more of that person's day to be done so habitually so they don't need self-control. Or even if it's not done absolutely automatically, at least the rest of the day is done in a way where their environment is congruent with them not making bad decisions, or not having to make any decisions because the decision is done for them because their environment is set up that way. So Precision Nutrition actually used a great example of this. I can't remember now. I have to go. Basically, instead of trying to like carve your own, say you're in the jungle, and instead of trying to carve your own path out around all this sticks and trees and this mess you can't get past, spend that time, the effort to carve your own path out. You simply went on a path that led you to a goal. So it's much easier because the path is carved out for you. So it's just guiding you towards your goal. You want to think of that the same way as your environment. It guides you towards making good decisions, and guides you, that in itself guides you towards your goal. Okay, that's the first thing. Now the second thing is a little bit, I hate saying mindset, but it's kind of how you see yourself, we'll say. And a large majority of, well, not a large majority, it's a part of psychology where you're trying to reframe your thoughts, and your thoughts persuade your actions, and your actions obviously persuade your results or cause your results. So if you change your way of thinking, that's going to change your behavior, and that's going to change your results. An example of this is what we're talking about. A lot of people have the opinion of themselves that they lack self-control. Okay? Now, obviously, if you frame yourself in that way, what do you think is going to happen when you come up and have to say no to something? Well, you've already convinced yourself you don't have any self-control. So, of course, you're going to crumble. What if you thought, I do have self-control? What am I telling myself? I'm telling myself a load of shite. I do have self-control. I can say no to those situations. Now, you've created a label that you can then live up to. Funny enough, there's a thing in psychology. Sounds a bit stupid because I can't remember the name of it, but if you or even someone else, and this may be different for different social circles, you may have a different identity than with your family or with your friends or with your teachers or with your work colleagues. But if they label you a certain way, unconsciously you will try to mold yourself to fit that label. Okay, example, if your family labels you, I'm talking from experience here, as messy, unconsciously most of the time you are going to be messy to try fit that label. Or if people label you stupid, unconsciously you're probably going to maybe be stupid around them to fit that label. Same goes for being late. Same goes for being early. Whatever it is. So that's interesting for them. So it obviously works for labeling yourself. You will fit that whatever label you give yourself. So if you keep giving yourself the label that you have a low locus of control, you have a low sense of control in situations, of course the situation is going to win. You're not going to be able to do it. So that's the second thing. So catch yourself when you keep saying, "Oh, I've lacked self-control." You don't. No, it's not a personality trait. You keep telling yourself that is making it worse. So stop saying that. Now, the third thing. There's going to be situations where you can't control your environment. You may be at a business meeting where you're going for dinner or drinks, or in the staff kitchen room. Staff kitchen, or maybe your desk and someone comes over. The easy example is when you're going to dinner. But the same, this works for all those things. What we can use a psychological technique known as implementation intention. Implementation intention. And basically, it is a form of mental rehearsal. So if you're going for dinner, or if you know you're faced regularly with situations, just like I've mentioned, you can mentally rehearse what you're going to say in those situations. And again, if anyone's kind of looked into sports performance or anything in that same realm of performance, or you'll know that mental rehearsal fires the same neurons. Not fires the same neurons. Your brain can't differentiate real life versus mental rehearsal. Your brain's neurons fire in the same way as if it was real. So in golf, it's really big. Obviously, I think there was a story of someone that was in jail and literally mentally rehearsed playing the golf course they played at so well, came out and knocked like 10 or 15 off his handicap straight away because he was visualizing so vividly. Same way when it comes to like important stuff in sports, such as kicking. Mental rehearsals are massive. So you meant to rehearse kicking, all the things with it. So when you get up to it, it's going to seem exactly like you practice and mentally rehearse together. So you're reinforcing that firing pattern even more. So it's going to be stronger when you get to it. You're going to practice more. The same way when it comes to this, you can mentally rehearse what you're going to say in those situations, so you can vividly enact or reenact, if it already happened and it happens regular, what you're going to say in those situations. Someone offers you a drink, for example, and your calories don't really fit having a lot of drinks. You mentally rehearse yourself saying, no, I'm okay, thanks, whatever, I'll just have a Diet Coke. So in that moment when you're at dinner, and that's the time you decide to make a decision you haven't really thought about before that, it's probably going to lead to a bad choice because everyone's in a good heightened state of enthusiasm, versus when you're back in the real world and you're thinking about your goals and you're thinking a bit more straight. It's a better time to actually mentally rehearse what you're going to say, because they're going to be different in most cases. Most people can attest it. Same what happens when you're at work, when someone offers you cake. Again, if cake doesn't really fit your calories that moment of time, you mentally rehearse to saying, no, my goals at the moment aren't congruent with eating that cake, or no, I'm okay, thank you, I don't eat that, whatever it is. Even going on that, you can actually the thing saying, I won't have a drink versus I don't drink, or whatever it is. Sometimes that's a bit stronger. Maybe that may push people to stop asking so much. So mental rehearsal. Mentally rehearse what you're going to say, and that will save you the brain power when you're in the situation of what's going to happen, and saves you making a bad decision. You're increasing your chance of making the right decision that is congruent with your goal, and you're taking that emotional energy of having to decide in the moment what you're doing. You get decision fatigue. That's number 3. And number 4, we'll say this is the last one. Think of self-control as something you can use not when you're absolutely faced in that moment of time as much with a temptation, but something you'd use ahead of time. And like we said, you'll use it and you'll think about, okay, what are my weaknesses when it comes to food? What are my trigger foods? Remove temptations from your environment, control what's the foods around you, like we said, etc., etc. So use self-control in the moment when you're not faced with temptations, but you're using it ahead of time to construct all these things, to mentally rehearse, to construct your environment. And when you get to these moments, firstly, when you get to the actual moments, so you said you have to decide or make a decision that's out of your realm of mental rehearsal, you might be caught off guard. There is a theory when it comes to self-control. It's like it's a limited resource. Again, this may be, some people agree, some people disagree to this, but let's say it's true. Well, if someone has spent the whole day trying to use self-control, they're more likely to probably, the brain's just going to get fried. And again, decision fatigue can tie into this. You're more likely to make a bad decision because you've just made so many decisions up to that point. So let's say we've done all these other things, mental rehearsal, your environment, and reframing the way we think about our own self-control. Well, when we do get those odd occasions where we need to use it, okay, our battery's probably going to be full to be able to do that. Oh, I'm going to add number 5 in. Excuse me. Self-control, and again, I'm going to use self-control in those instances where we've controlled other factors and we really need to use it or rely on it or fall back on it, the odd occasion. It can also be affected by stress, obviously, like most things are. Self-control is primarily done in a process in the prefrontal cortex, the kind of the new part of our brain, which distinguishes us from other animals and mammals and makes us human. When we're chronically stressed, it shuts down that part of the brain. So that's obviously when people make worse decisions, and everyone can attest to that. So control stress as best you can, going off the other podcasts, of adding whatever things in you need to do. And also, then when you are stressed, the other aspects we talked about, your environment, need to be on point even more, because you're setting yourself up for already to make bad decisions. Yes. So, hopefully that has been helpful. And like anything when it comes to your behaviors or figuring out, it's not a case that you just get it straight away. Work at these things. And funny enough, like when you listen to these aspects, all these are driving your ability to create a calorie deficit. This is essentially what we're trying to say, but we're doing it in a way that is going to make you easy to create a calorie deficit. And thus these are the aspects that allow you to carry it out long term. Yes, anyone can do it for a few weeks. Relax. You're not getting a gold star from me. But the ability to do this for months or even sometimes years, that is really what separates someone who has normally got a coach or at some stage to help them create a strategy to be able to do this long term. When stress hits, can you still carry on your plan? And on that point, last thing, this book, ebook I'm reading at the moment by Dr. Melissa Davis, who she's going to come on the podcast in 2 weeks. Something which I've read about before. When you're stressed, you revert back to habitual patterns. Okay, so if you're worried about self-control, you should probably be worried more about creating, like we said, 50% of your day, like people do, to be automatic, that you automatically do. Okay, I said automatic twice there. Behaviors which you automatically do. So when stress hits, basically she stated that when stress hits, people revert back to their habitual behaviors. In the study they did on people in exams, if those people already, quote unquote, ate healthy or exercised, they reverted back to those habits even more so when they were stressed during exam time, versus when these students who had the habitual patterns of eating shit and not exercising, they reverted back to these patterns even more. So again, feeding back into the other episodes on habits, the importance of slowly layering the habits into your lifestyle and making sure you do them long enough for them to become habitual. Then this is going to be like insurance to your environment, because you're going to be able to fall back onto these habits, good habits, during times of stress. And then thus you won't need as much self-control because you're already doing it. See the way this is kind of a big, mad, holistic view of everything, where what we normally hear about fat loss is so narrow that just create a calorie deficit. Yeah, just go to the moon. Okay, it's not called rocket science it's called rocket science for a reason, because it's hard to do. So it's the application, it's the strategy, it's what we need to know that dictates a good or bad plan. So there you go. Hopefully that explained kind of that aspect, how I think of self-control, how I use it with my clients. These are all the things I like to tick off first before wishing for more self-control to the self-control god, or asking Santa or the Easter Bunny for it. Put those aspects into your plan first, and everything else takes care of itself. Again, a good example of that last point I talked about was one of my clients, Courtney, who before she came to me never stuck to any training plan for longer than a few weeks ever before. She works a stressful job, and it's even more stressful around Christmas. So she started with me in August, and the only thing we're going to focus on starting off was just training 3 days a week. So she booked in with me, again using that accountability factor to reinforce those habits even more, especially at the start. After a while, training 3 days a week, no worries. Friends couldn't believe she's actually sticking to the training plan long enough. When she got to Christmas, she was in high-end retail, so absolutely goes bananas. She still got those 3 sessions in, and they carried her through, and actually she hit her lowest weight on Christmas Day. Again, the importance of looking at the behavioural change aspect. So there we go. Episode 43 in the books. As always, please rate and review on iTunes, and actually share this on your story on Instagram every week, and I'm going to pick one person out, and I'm going to send you whatever you want, free programs, free nutrition, anything that I can have to assist you. So share it on your Instagram story, tag me in it, and let's spread the good word, and let's zone out all those other numpties giving people bad advice, and these poor people who are dying to just change their body, getting absolutely terrible advice, and then wasting their time, money and effort and getting nowhere, which is makes us all sad. So there you go. Hope you enjoyed the episode, and I will see you all in the next one.